I was trapped in the life I built for someone else, the story of my own silent prison. It started off so simple, so easy. I met Ryan in a cafe downtown. A typical meet-cute story, nothing out of the ordinary. We exchanged numbers, went on a couple of dates, and before I knew it, I was falling for him. He was everything I thought I wanted: confident, charming, ambitious. I was 28, finally starting to feel like my life was coming together. And I thought, this is it. This is the beginning of the rest of my life. But it wasn't. The story I thought I was starting wasn't the one I would end up living. Looking back now, I can see how easy it was to get sucked into it. The smile, the compliments, the perfect future painted in broad strokes, everything was just a little too perfect. And it wasn't until later that I realized I wasn't building a life with Ryan. I was building a life for him. The first few months were bliss. Ryan and I were inseparable, always on the same page. He would surprise me with flowers, with spontaneous weekend trips, with grand romantic gestures that made me feel like I was the center of his world. My friends would joke that we were the perfect couple. And for a while, I believed them. Ryan was everything I wanted him to be. Or at least, I convinced myself he was. But it was always easy to overlook the cracks. When you're swept up in something so consuming, it's hard to see where the edges blur. I thought our relationship was based on love, but it didn't take long for me to realize that it wasn't just love, it was control. The first red flag was subtle, almost unnoticeable. Ryan had a way of guiding me, like a hand on my back, always leading, never letting me lead. He suggested things. He helped me with my career, offered advice on what I should wear, how I should act, what friends I should keep. At first, I thought it was cute. He cared about me. He wanted to make me the best version of myself, right? But then came the small manipulations, suggesting I change my appearance, tweaking my career choices, influencing my social life. It started off as tiny adjustments, all for my own good, and I accepted them without question. By the time we moved in together, it was already happening. My apartment, the place I'd called home for years, was slowly being replaced with his vision of what it should be. His furniture, his decor, his choices about how we spent weekends. It was no longer just our life, it was his life, and I was fitting into it. I didn't even realize how much of me was slipping away, until one day, I walked past my old bookshelf and realized I hadn't picked up a book in months. The things that used to bring me joy, my hobbies, my passions, had become secondary. And I didn't see it until it was too late. Ryan's control wasn't just about decisions. It was about emotions. He knew how to push all the right buttons, to make me feel small, to make me feel like his needs came first. He would often make subtle comments, like, "I think you'd look better if you lost a few pounds," or "Don't you think you should focus more on your career instead of your hobbies?" I laughed it off at first. I told myself, he just wants what's best for me. But inside, I felt a dread creeping up, like I was losing parts of myself with every passing day. It wasn't until one evening, months into living together, that I felt the first real pang of loneliness. We were sitting at dinner, Ryan talking about his day, and I just stared at him, wondering who I was anymore. I had been so focused on making him happy, on creating a life he'd want, that I'd stopped focusing on myself. "Are you listening to me, Lena?" Ryan's voice broke through my thoughts. I snapped back to reality, nodded, and smiled. But inside, I felt a sickening emptiness. I didn't recognize the person I had become. I had traded pieces of myself, and I couldn't remember what was left. The first big fight we had came out of nowhere. Ryan was angry because I didn't want to go to one of his friends' parties. I had a headache, and I wanted to stay home. He got upset, and I ended up apologizing, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. "Don't you want to be a part of my world, Lena?" he asked, frustration evident in his voice. It hit me then. I wasn't just being asked to participate. I was being demanded to fit into a life that wasn't mine. But I didn't speak up. I gave in, as I always did. The guilt started to creep in. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was becoming someone I didn't recognize. I tried to talk to my friends about it, but I kept quiet, afraid of what they would think. Would they think I was crazy? That I was overreacting? Instead, I smiled, I nodded, and I played the role of the perfect partner. But behind the facade, I was suffocating, The fear started to build, fear that if I didn't keep up, I would lose Ryan. Fear that if I didn't follow his plans, I'd have nothing left. One afternoon, Ryan and I were out for a walk, and I realized something terrifying. I didn't know how to exist outside of him anymore. My entire identity had been shaped by him, by his preferences, his decisions. I didn't even know who I was on my own. That was the moment I realized the depth of my situation. I wasn't just in a relationship. I was trapped in a life I had built for him. I decided, then and there, that something had to change. I couldn't keep living like this. But how could I change? How could I break free from a relationship that had consumed me so completely? The decision was terrifying. Ryan wasn't a bad person. He wasn't abusive. But his expectations were suffocating, and I had to figure out how to regain control of my own life. In the weeks that followed, I began to pull away. It wasn't a dramatic shift, but a slow, painful process. Every time Ryan suggested something, whether it was a new plan, a new direction for our future, I would pause, reflect, and ask myself, is this what I want? The emotional struggle was exhausting. I felt torn between the life I had with Ryan and the life I had to rediscover on my own. Would he understand? Would he let me go? I began small. I started writing again. I started drawing, something I hadn't done in years. I reconnected with friends I had drifted away from. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of something familiar, a spark of myself. But with every step forward, I felt the pull of Ryan's expectations. He didn't understand what I was doing. Why are you spending so much time with your friends, Lena? Why aren't we spending more time together? But for the first time, I didn't apologize. I didn't explain myself away. I stood my ground. Despite all my efforts, there were days when I couldn't handle the emotional toll. I would cry alone in my room, feeling like I was losing both myself and the relationship. Ryan noticed, of course. He wanted to help, but his help felt like more of the same. It felt like he wanted to fix me, not let me fix myself. One evening, I broke down. I don't know who I am anymore, I whispered through my tears. Ryan, frustrated, said, "You're my perfect girl. You don't need to change. Why can't you just be happy with what we have?" But I wasn't happy. I wasn't even close. The day I finally confronted Ryan was the hardest thing I had ever done. I sat him down and said, "I can't keep doing this. I'm not the person I used to be. I've lost myself in this relationship, and I need to find myself again." Ryan's face fell. He didn't understand. "What do you mean? You're everything I've ever wanted." "I need to find what I want," I said, my voice shaking. "And I don't think I can do that with you." The breakup was brutal. Ryan didn't take it well. He tried to convince me to stay, promised that things would change, but I knew that I couldn't stay in a life that wasn't mine. I had to walk away, even though it hurt more than anything I had ever experienced. I spent weeks crying, reflecting, trying to make sense of everything. But as the days passed, I began to feel something else, relief. In the months that followed, I took the time to rediscover myself. I focused on my career, my hobbies, and my friendships. I took small steps every day to reclaim the parts of me I had lost. It wasn't easy. It was painful. But it was worth it. I had to learn how to love myself again, without the validation of a partner. I went on solo trips, explored new cities, met new people. For the first time, I realized that the world didn't revolve around someone else's expectations. I could define my life, my choices, and my future. I started writing again, something I had always loved, but had given up for Ryan's dreams. And as I wrote, I realized something important: I was free. Being alone was difficult at first. I was used to having someone with me all the time, someone to depend on. But I started to enjoy the solitude. I was finally able to hear my own thoughts, to make decisions without anyone else's influence. I began to appreciate my own company. And for the first time, I felt at peace. It took time, but eventually, I healed. The scars from the relationship were still there, but they weren't as sharp anymore. I could look at them without feeling anger or regret. They were just part of my journey. I wasn't the same person I was when I first met Ryan. I was stronger, more independent, and more whole than I had ever been. I didn't jump into another relationship right away. Instead, I focused on myself. I embraced the idea that I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was enough on my own. And that was enough to make me feel powerful. Looking back now, I realize that I needed to lose myself to find myself. It was only by letting go of a life I had built for someone else that I could finally build the life I wanted. I wasn't perfect, and I didn't have it all figured out. But I was free. And in the end, that's all that really matters.